Things to note for relative clauses with whose. In the previous lecture, I mentioned defining relative clauses. There are also non-defining relative clauses. Let's have a closer look at these now. We can use whose in defining or non-defining relative clauses. A defining relative clause specifies which person, animal, place, or plant we are talking about. For example, I like talking to and learning from people whose experience is greater than mine. This is a defining relative clause. We're defining the type of person I like talking to and I like learning from. We're specifying the type of person. A defining relative clause is essential to the sentence. If you don't include it, the sentence won't make sense, or you will leave the listener very confused. So think of a defining relative clause as essential, something that needs to be there in order to make the sentence comprehensible. Now let's look at a non-defining relative clause. A non-defining relative clause gives extra information about the person, animal, place, or plant. Look at the example below. The film was shot in New Zealand, whose scenery was perfect for the setting. Notice in this example, if we omitted the non-defining relative clause, the sentence would be perfectly understandable. We would just say, the film was shot in New Zealand. The non-defining relative clause simply adds extra information. This is optional. As such, we add a comma just before the non-defining relative clause. Here's another example of a non-defining relative clause which is interrupting the main sentence. Have a look at this example. The company, whose employees get over 3 months of holidays a year, is outperforming all rivals. In this example, you can see that the non-defining relative clause is offset with 2 commas, one before whose and one at the end of the clause. Notice as well that the original sentence can stand alone as its own sentence if it wishes. We could simply say, the company is outperforming all rivals. The non-defining relative clause simply adds extra information about the company. So defining relative clauses are essential to specify which animal or person or thing you're talking about. Non-defining relative clauses are not essential. They're just adding some extra information that you want the listener or the reader to know. It's just nice to add something extra sometimes so that they have more information about the thing you're talking about. So that's how we use non-defining and defining relative clauses with whose. Now move on to the speaking and listening practice exercises.